So it's an absolute honour this evening to be joined by Molly Galbraith. Thanks so much for coming on and speaking to me this evening, Molly.
Thank you for having me, David. I appreciate it.
It's an absolute pleasure. So just for people who may not be familiar with you and your work, if you'd like to give us a quick background of yourself and the work you're involved in.
Yeah, absolutely. How far do you want me to go back? I mean, do you want me to start on like how I got started in the industry
how you got
and all that?
in the industry, everything, yeah.
Perfect. Okay. So I was a fairly active child. I was a competitive gymnast for 5 years growing up, which is hysterical because I'm almost 6 feet tall. So people don't normally look at me and think gymnast, but I did that for 5 years. And then I was a cheerleader for a couple years in high school. And at the end of high school and beginning of college, I became really sedentary. Prior to that, I had been able to out exercise or, my terrible eating habits. I was eating a lot of fast food. And so that caught up with me at the end of high school, beginning of college. It gained a significant amount of weight. And then in 2004, February actually, so 13 years ago, I decided that I wanted to get in shape. I realized that I was happy with a lot of things that were going on in my life, but the one thing that I wasn't happy with was the way that my body looked and the way that I felt. And those were the things that I really had the most control over. I was in college, I was working, I was in a sorority. At that point in time, you can't control your friends, you can't control your boss, you can't control your professors, but what you can control is what you're eating and what you're doing with your body. And so it was at that point in time that I decided I wanted to get in shape. And so I hired a personal trainer, started working with him. As a poor college student, I couldn't afford working with somebody for too long, but did that for a little while to kind of get my jump start. And then about 8 months later, I started dating a guy at the gym who was a trainer, which was much more economical. And he was a competitive bodybuilder and powerlifter. So I kind of was thrust into the intense training almost immediately. And in 2005, I did my first powerlifting meet. And then in 2006, 7, and 8, I competed in figure, which for people who don't know, it's kind of a mix between bikini and bodybuilding. So it's more muscular than a bikini competitor and a little bit less muscular than a bodybuilder. So I did that for 3 years. And then that was a big part of what ended up shaping my long-term journey. Every time I competed in figure, for people who don't know, you have to get extremely lean and push your body extremely hard to compete in something like that. So every time I competed, I've got a train. I don't know if you can hear the train going by. Every time I competed, my body would rebound really badly afterwards. And so I would get really lean, and then I would put on like 15 to 20 pounds in a matter of a couple weeks after my competition. And so after my third competition in 2008, it was different. My body rebounded in a different way. Not only did I gain a lot of weight, but I was physically very depressed. My body, I felt like I couldn't move. I felt like I, couldn't get up off the couch to get a drink of water. I went to the doctor and I was diagnosed with Hashimoto's, which is autoimmune thyroid disease. I was diagnosed with PCOS, which is polycystic ovarian syndrome. And I was diagnosed with adrenal dysfunction. So basically there was a feedback loop issue between my brain and my adrenals. And so that was a really, really hard time for me. For the last 5 years, 4 or 5 years, I had been working out really hard, pushing myself really hard. I had been really lean. I'd been getting a lot of positive praise for the changes that I had made to my body. I had become that fit girl, that everybody asked for advice and, oh my gosh, she's in such good shape. And all of a sudden my body felt completely out of my control. And that was really hard for me because I had started putting a lot of stake in the way that my body looked at that point. So I was like, you know what, if I can't control the way my body looks, I'm going to get really, really strong. And so I decided to compete in powerlifting again. So I competed again in 2009 and had a really good experience. Shortly after that, I started working with a coach named Mike Robertson and a guy named Bill Hartman at iFast. And I realized that I had built this giant foundation, or this giant house of strength on this teeny tiny foundation. And it was kind of teetering on there. So I started working with them and kind of got back to the basics. Worked with them for several years, off and on, actually, for the last 6 or 7 years. But started getting strong again, was feeling really, really good. And then in 2012, my dad passed away unexpectedly. Found out he was sick on a Saturday, and he died on a Tuesday, or Tuesday night, Wednesday morning. And that really rocked my world. And then a few weeks after that, I was in the gym deadlifting, and I injured my back. And that kicked off a couple years of chronic pain. And then several months after that, I left a 6-year relationship. And I promise all of this is relevant to my fitness journey. I'll get to that in a minute. So the end of 2012, beginning of 2013, my weight had climbed back up to close to where it had been in 2004 when I got started. My body looked very different, despite only being 1.5 pounds different from 2004 to 2013, because thank you, muscle mass, right? It looked really different, but I started getting a lot of negative comments about my body. I was getting them from people on the internet who were asking why I wasn't as lean as I used to be. I was getting them from women in my community who were telling other women not to come to my gym and train with me because they might look like me. I had a fellow male colleague of mine stand in my gym in my office and insinuate to my staff that I was fat. Just a lot of backlash about my body. And I'm almost 5'11". I was 183 pounds, 183 and a half pounds. Like, not that it matters what my body looks like, because those are not appropriate things to say about or to someone anyway. But, I was still like in a healthy weight range, was like relatively active. I just wasn't hyper focused on my nutrition and my training for that year. And so for me, that's when I got to the point where I realized that I could no longer put so much of my self-worth and my identity in my body, because it's really popular right now to be like, don't worry about how you look, just focus on how strong you are. Yeah. Women should have performance goals, right? Yeah. But it's the flip side of the coin. Like, there was a time when I wanted to lose weight, have a flat stomach, wear a size 6, and that's what mattered. That's when I was good enough. And then I was like, well, if I can't do that anymore, then I'm only good enough if I can bench 175 and squat 315 and deadlift 405, right? And so to me, that became, it was no longer the numbers on the scale, it was the numbers on the bar, but I was still letting a number define me and define whether I was good enough, whether I was worthy, whether I was good at my job, whether I was knowledgeable enough to help women reach their goals. And so I realized at that point in time, that was 2013. So I think at that point I'd been in therapy for about 3 or 4 years, something like that. And so I'd been working on some internal stuff anyway, but I realized at that point that had been my problem all along, was that I was pursuing health and fitness in an effort to fix what was wrong with me. And so I started recognizing that working out's fantastic. I love strength training. I love good nutrition. I love helping women engage in self-care practices. But if you don't realize that you're good enough as you are, with no strings or numbers attached, then none of it really matters. And so that was the biggest shift in my health and fitness journey, was in 2013, when I said, you know what, I'm going to embrace my body the way that it is right now, and no longer attach it to what size I wear, what the scale says, how much I can squat, any of those external factors. So it's been a long and winding journey for sure over the last, 13 years, but that's kind of brought me where I am today, and to kind of Girls Gone Strong and what we do at Girls Gone Strong, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a little bit. That's really informed kind of the mission and the vision of the entire organization.
Brilliant. So you're very kind of diverse and bumpy background there. You have a lot of wealth of experience from a range of different, even just if we take your sporting context, you've been at kind of extreme lengths of prepping your strength levels for powerlifting, but also getting down to very low, even unhealthy levels of body fat to stand on stage. And this ultimately led to Girls Gone Strong being founded, and you being a part of that. So first of all, if you'd like to briefly explain what is Girls Gone Strong and what's its mission, and then also if you'd like to expand on to one of your key missions is to kind of lash back and fight back against the influence of the weight loss industry on women. And so if you'd like to firstly give us the brief synopsis of what the mission of Girls Gone Strong is, and then we'll talk a bit about the influence of the weight loss industry.
Yeah, absolutely. So Girls Gone Strong started in 2011. There were 7 of us who got together to support one of the women at her powerlifting meet. And we all just thought it would be fun to get together and, talk about strength training and work out. And a couple months before that, Brett Contreras, I don't know if you know Brett, the glute guy, had sent an email to about a dozen women in the industry. And he said, hey, ladies, now you guys have each other's information, do something awesome, which I think is really cool. He really made an effort to say there are more women who need to rise up in the world of strength and conditioning. I'm connecting you guys, do something. And so we invited all of those women to come, and 7 women showed up. And And that weekend we were like, well, I'm passionate about women, getting more women strength training. I'm passionate about it. I'm passionate about it. What are we going to do about it? And we had such great natural chemistry that we were like, we've got to do something. And so we formed Girls Gone Strong. So that was in 2011. Again, 7 women from all different areas of health and fitness, powerlifting, collegiate strength and conditioning, running, figure competitions, kettlebell experts. But we all came together with the passion of spreading the gospel of strength training to women everywhere. And everybody came in with their own kind of business and brand. And over the years, each of the women kind of stepped away to do their own thing. And again, the mission started out with, we want to get more women strength training. And over the last 5.5 years, the mission has evolved from women should strength train to women should actually do whatever the hell they want with their bodies. And we hope that strength training is one of those things because it's a really good option. And so we evolved from just being about strength training to a much bigger, deeper mission. So now, Girls Gone Strong is a global movement that aims to empower women to discover all that's possible for their life and their bodies and help them figure out what goals they want to set for themselves without shame or judgment. And then we provide the tools, the sane and sustainable tools to help them get there. So it's basically like, hey, these are all of the things your body can be. You can want to gain muscle. You can want to get stronger. You can want to, run. You can want to play sports as an adult. You can want to lose body fat. There are all of these things that you can do. And when you figure out what that is, then we can help you get there in a sane and sustainable way so that fitness enhances your life instead of becomes your life. So that's the mission of Girls Gone Strong now. And then we talk about how, being confident in the weight room or feeling good in your body can translate into all areas of your life. Are you more likely to, speak up in the boardroom when you wouldn't normally because you wouldn't be confident? Are you more willing to show up in all areas of your life because you feel comfortable in your skin?
Perfect. And that's something we'll touch on later in the podcast. But one thing you're very vocal about, and I've spoken out many times, Molly, is against the influence of the weight loss industry, particularly over the last decade. So what is your take on what significance has the weight loss industry had in influencing women's perceptions of themselves over the last decade?
Yeah, it's just devastating. The weight loss industry in the U.S. alone, and this stat is from a couple of years ago, it might be bigger, but it was a $64 billion a year industry. And it's an industry that's based on telling women that they're not good enough. They're not thin enough. They're not skinny enough. They're not lean enough. That's what it was for years. Now it's like, well, your butt's not big enough. Your breasts aren't big enough. So it's like this, whatever the body type du jour is of the moment, you're not enough. And so we can sell you this pill, this powder, this gadget, this class, this, surgery, this whatever to fix yourself so that you will meet today's standards. And, it's really interesting because a lot of people are like, well, screw that. We shouldn't worry about how we look. Don't focus on aesthetics. None of that matters. And one of the women who has been really integral in changing or shifting or driving the evolution of GGS is a woman named Erin Brown, and she's one of our advisory board members. And she has a fantastic quote where she talks about beauty, and she says excuse me, where she says the trouble isn't in valuing beauty. Because we value beauty in music, in art, in nature, we seek it in all of these ways. The trouble is in defining beauty in a context so narrow that we can't possibly achieve it. And we evaluate celebrities in parts and pieces. We're like, we want so-and-so's lips, we want so-and-so's butt, we want so-and-so's shoulders, right? And when we're striving to reach these kind of arbitrary standards of beauty, when you get there, you realize that you're handed a whole nother set of them, right? So when I lost a significant amount of weight, people would be like, what happened to your boobs, right? It's it doesn't matter. No matter what you do, if other people define your standards and ideals of beauty for you, you're never going to get there. And so what she says is the trouble isn't in valuing beauty, and the solution isn't in not valuing beauty, but in expanding its definition to include ourselves. And she says something really interesting about when people told me I was beautiful on the inside, that didn't make me feel any better. It just made me feel detached from myself, right? And so I love that because I think that that again, telling ourselves not to worry about how we look or not to be focused on any of those things. And that's shallow and you shouldn't do that. You know, we try to stop shoulding all over women, by the way, at Girls Gone Strong, telling them what they should do, what they shouldn't do. We use should in the context of, if you want to be here, then you should do this, right? But we try to be careful not to give them too many shoulds of things that they should be doing. But yeah, the weight loss industry, that's exactly what it's about. You need to have this body. You need to have this, you know, you can't have cellulite. Like, that's not normal, right? There's gross. There's something wrong with you. Fix this. Tone and tighten your tummy in 10 days. Get rid of cottage cheese thighs, right? And it's all on fear and it's all on insecurities. It's preying on women's insecurities, telling us that we're not good enough, as if we need more of that, right? Like, we're already told, like, you're too loud, you're too, you know, bitchy, you're too this, you're too that, like, you're not a good mother, whatever. We're already told all of the ways that we don't measure up, and then telling us how we don't measure up in our bodies is just one more way. There are some really kind of crushing statistics. 92% of, I think, 10-year-old girls have been on a diet, and 54% of grown women would rather be hit by a truck than be fat. And I mean, these are just absolutely, when you think about what that means, and you think and you realize that women not feeling comfortable in their skin keeps them from going out for sports teams, keeps them from speaking up in class, keeps them from going out for a job promotion that they might want. I mean, it is literally crushing us in every single area of our lives. So it's not just about bodies. It's not just about what size you wear. It's not just about, you know, are you fit or do you have abs? It's literally preventing women from living their lives. I heard from a woman the other day who was on vacation with her kids. I posted a picture. I posted one over a year ago on Facebook about body embracement that reached a whole lot of people. And then I posted one recently this year on New Year's that reached a lot of people. And I was talking about flaws and cellulite. And she said, "Thank you so much for this picture. I've been on vacation with my kids for the last 6 days, and I haven't gotten in the water to play with them because I don't want to walk across the beach because I don't want anyone to see my legs." And I mean, this woman is literally missing out on living life with her children because she's too afraid of what some stranger is going to think about what her legs might look like. So it goes a lot deeper than just, you know, than just like, oh, I don't like myself. It's like, it really infiltrates the entirety of women's lives and prevents them from, you know, achieving their dreams, as big and kind of corny as that sounds.
And with the vast amount of experience you have working with women across a lot of very different populations, what are the kind of the main self-professed flaws that women can unhealthily obsess about?
Oh gosh, there are so many. Cellulite is a huge one. Belly rolls, or having a belly that's not flat, is really big. Stretch marks. And the really interesting thing about some of these is that these flaws, these self-perceived flaws, well, there's many interesting things about them. Number one, most of the time we're obsessing about them significantly more than other people would ever dream of. Most people are so absorbed with what's going on with themselves, they're not noticing with what's going on with somebody else. I did a post on my site a couple years ago called Stretch Marks, Cellulite, and a Love Your Body Challenge. And I reached out to several, over a dozen female fitness professionals, and I asked them if they would take a picture of themselves, of their cellulite, their stretch marks, whatever this perceived flaw that they might have, and share it with the world. And then also take a picture of themselves, you know, really kind of fit and showing how in shape they are. And the idea started out with, hey, you know, even fitness pros have cellulite, or even fitness pros have stretch marks. But it kind of evolved into so much more than that. I was getting text messages and emails all week leading up to that post publishing, and they'd say, "Hey, can you see my cellulite enough in this picture? Does it look visible enough?" And they started recognizing that what they had perceived had been something that they had was something that, like, when they went to take a picture of it and they were like, okay, is the world going to even notice this enough to think that this is a thing, right? So their perception of their self was totally different. There was just a lot more that went into it than I originally intended. And so that was a really cool kind of project that I did. And then just the main intention was to help women see these things are normal. Everybody has them. And a lot of times they're connected to like the stories of our lives, right? So many women get stretch marks when they have their children, you know, or they have a scar from like something that they dead 10 years ago. That was a really big part of their life. And they're so ashamed of these marks on their bodies because they think that it's a flaw, when really it's just kind of telling the story of their life.
Yeah, and I think that is a very important message. If we can just reiterate again for any listeners that are listening, and I have a lot of trainers listen, so it's one thing that they should really stress with their clients, especially their kind of adolescent female clients. It can be a big problem that cellulite especially is very common amongst all women, but even we know that if you have severe cellulite, reducing body fat can reduce the appearance of cellulite. But even when we get down to these very lean levels, even unhealthily lean sometimes, the cellulite is still present and just a normal, natural thing.
Yeah, and I think I was talking to a woman that works for me, and I didn't know this, but she said that cellulite wasn't even a thing that was talked about until, I believe, the 20s or the 30s, when these spas opened up to help cure cellulite. So basically, cellulite wasn't even a thing until the solution was created, and then people were told it was a thing. So I haven't done my own research into that, but I found that really interesting. That again, it was industry, it was money, it was greed that was driving the idea that this thing was a flaw to begin with.
And as a personal trainer, from your perspective, how do you approach or deal with women who you kind of find you're working with and you believe that they're unhealthily obsessing about their kind of self-identified flaws? Obviously, we can't go beyond our scope of practice in terms of psychological, but just in general, how do you kind of broach that subject with a client who you think may potentially be unhealthily obsessing?
Yeah, that's such a great question. So we have a program called Strongest You Coaching, and it's a 9-month online coaching program that we do with women. And it's this 3-prong approach of training, nutrition, and mindset. And so I think the first thing for women to kind of tackle, because it feels like an impossible mountain to climb when they know how they feel about themselves, and then they are thinking about, how am I ever going to get to this place where I feel good in my body? But it's just like anything else. It's just like going from a body weight squat to squatting 315 pounds. How do you get there? And it's a step-by-step process that has to be, you have to dedicate time to consistently over a long period of time, or you're not going to reach that goal. So the first thing that we do with our clients in that program is focus on awareness, because even though they know that they don't like themselves, they don't realize how often they are obsessing about, focused on, or telling themselves that there's something wrong. So, we talk about mantras some in the program, and like a mantra sounds kind of like hippy dippy, right? It sounds like a yogi, like at the top of a mountain, like with a mantra. But what people don't realize is they have a mantra. They have a mantra that they tell themselves all the time. I'm not good enough. I'm too fat. I'm gross. I'm disgusting. I'm a pig. This looks terrible on me. How could my husband be attracted to me? My kids must be embarrassed. Like, you have a mantra whether you like it or not. It's what you tell yourself day in and day out about yourself and about your body. And so first things first, the awareness piece is really key. Getting women just to stop. Maybe they don't change their mantra. Maybe they don't say anything nice about themselves yet, but just to get them aware of how often they're saying or thinking something negative about their bodies. How often they're saying it to themselves. How often they're saying it in front of their children. Mommy can't have that. She's on a diet, or, whatever. How often they're saying it to their friends. And then even how often they're engaging in nasty behavior about other people as well. What does she think she's wearing? Like, this all ties in together, right? People who feel good in their skin and feel happy and positive aren't worried about what the person next to them is wearing. You know what I mean? If she's too big or too whatever to be wearing those shorts, like, they're not thinking about those kinds of things because it just doesn't matter. So it's the awareness piece of how often are you thinking about these things? How often are you saying these things to yourself, to other people, in front of your children? So really starting with the awareness is key. And then again, one thing that Aaron Brown recommends that I really love is starting with something neutral, because going from like, I'm disgusting to like, I'm feeling fly, like that's probably not going to happen, right? But going from I'm disgusting to this is what my hair looks like on a Tuesday, or whatever, just starting with something really neutral. Again, like meeting your client where they are and just slowly progressing them. You wouldn't take someone who's never done a body weight squat and put 135 on the bar and expect them to be able to do it. So you're going to you're going to pattern, and then you're going to practice, and then you're going to perfect. So you're going to get them to start being aware of what they're doing. And then slowly but surely, you're going to say, hey, when you find yourself thinking something really negative, then replace that with a more neutral thought. And so that's where they start. So they start with replacing those with more neutral thoughts. And then over time, once that gets more comfortable, they can start replacing them with more positive thoughts. And they don't even have to start with their bodies. If they're so used to speaking negatively about themselves in all areas, maybe they start with somewhere that's a little bit easier. Like I dealt with this conflict with my child really well today. Like that's how they start complimenting themselves. Or I really kicked butt on that proposal at work. Like start saying other things, because the body can be such a touchy and sensitive subject. Maybe you start with other areas of their life that they can tackle, where then saying something positive to themselves doesn't feel so foreign. And it's also okay to fake it until it starts to become, something that you believe. I think that's okay as well. So there are lots of different approaches to take, but the awareness is key. Slowly progressing them over time is key, and consistency is key. It's just like brushing your teeth. It's just like squatting. It's just like anything else. It has to be done regularly over time, or it's not going to be able to be maintained.
Perfect. I think that's a really important message. So obviously you come from a very prolific background in terms of strength training, and you're an experienced strength coach yourself. But within the industry, when we try and encourage females into strength training, we often are still kind of met with these misconceptions and myths. And one of the most common ones we hear as coaches is the fear of becoming bulky when lifting weights. Women have this fear that they're going to turn into the Incredible Hulk or something
right.
overnight. So first of all, I'll put the question very broad to you. Is the fear of women becoming bulky due to weightlifting justified?
So this is one of my favorite questions, because I think everybody gets it wrong. So the really popular thing to say is that no, women aren't going to get bulky when they start strength training. But the problem with that answer is that it misses the entire point, that no one's asking these women how they want to look or what they're comfortable with, right? So I actually wrote an article about this maybe a year or two ago for GGS, and because every other article I had read, to me, missed the mark because they never talked about that. No one's saying, again, we're taking the choice away from these women about what they want their body to look like. And that's the whole point, is body autonomy. They get to decide for themselves. They get to govern for themselves how they want their bodies to look. And it's not our job to try to convince them otherwise. And so a couple things here. Number one, I think that depending on what a woman wants her body to look like maybe gaining 3 pounds of muscle mass, she does feel like she looks too bulky. Unfortunately, that might be true. I think there's a huge education piece there in terms of letting them know that gaining muscle doesn't happen overnight. And we can get into that in a minute. I think there's also the exposure piece. If all you see are runway models who are 5'11" and 125 pounds, no shit, you're going to think you look bulky, right? When you have a little bit of muscle mass here. So I think exposure to a lot of different body types is really important. And that's one thing that we encourage, especially for young girls, is exposing them to women of all different shapes, sizes, ages, races, ability levels, and saying look how great this is. Look what this person can do. Look how strong she is. Look how smart she is, right? So letting young girls and even women be exposed in a positive light to women of all different shapes and sizes. My niece is a really interesting example of this. So my sister and her wife lived in New Zealand for 10 years. Her wife is from New Zealand, and my niece was born over there, grew up over there, and they don't have, and this isn't a New Zealand thing, this is a my sister thing. Yeah. They don't have TV, they don't have magazines, they don't have, she doesn't really watch any mainstream movies or anything like that. And she has zero idea about, body related issues. So she was sitting on the foam roller one day, and she was rolling around and saying that she was exercising or whatever. And then that night when she was getting in the bath, she said, "Mama, look how big and strong my bum is. Isn't it wonderful?" And so in her mind, it's big, it's strong, it's great. She grabbed my sister's arm and she says, "Mama, I love your fat. It's so squishy." And she's not even thinking that fat is a bad thing. She doesn't have that connotation with it, So it's really interesting to see her. They live in the States now, but it's really interesting to see for the first 7 years of her life, she wasn't exposed to anything being wrong with any woman's bodies. And the only bodies that she saw were the women that she saw in real life who hadn't been airbrushed or, whatever. So I think that exposure to a wide variety of bodies is really important. But when it comes to actually physiologically, is it possible for women to gain a significant amount of muscle mass? So I have tried to dig into this, exactly how much muscle mass a woman can gain when she starts strength training. And I tapped a bunch of experts. It's really difficult to come up with exact numbers because pretty much all the research has been done in men, postmenopausal women, or women with health problems. However, all of the experts that I tapped said that a woman who's starting to strength train, first of all, we know that neural gains are what happen primarily in the first 6 weeks or so. So you're unlikely to gain mass during that time because your body's just, getting stronger and greasing that kind of neural groove. But when a woman starts strength training consistently in an attempt to actually gain muscle and get stronger, they said that about a half a pound to a pound a month for the first year is what they think is possible for most women, and that it slows significantly after that. So we're looking at maybe 6 to 10 pounds the first year for women. I mean, everyone's going to have some kind of anecdotal story of their cousin, sister's best friend who, put on a ton of muscle in a year or whatever. But for the most part, it's not going to be significant. And for most women, they're also going to be losing body fat at the same time if their nutrition is on point. So what most women will experience when they start strength training is a body recomposition or, gaining muscle mass, losing body fat. And most women I see are more satisfied with their bodies significantly after they start strength training. The ones who think that they're going to get bulky or who do feel bulky either have not made changes to their diet, so they're gaining muscle mass and not losing anything else, or they just have a very narrow definition of what okay looks like for their body. So that's generally what I see. And that's fine. Again, I would hope that they would expose themselves to a wider variety of body shapes and types so that maybe they could expand their definition a bit. But, that's not for me to, to determine for them. So all you can do is kind of educate. And I think really listen to their concerns. So when a woman says, I'm afraid I'm going to get bulky, the worst thing you can do is be like, oh, this is so annoying. This is we're beating a dead horse here, because they're coming to you with a valid concern. So if they come to you and say, I'm afraid I'm going to get bulky, and you blow them off, do you think they're going to feel comfortable saying, hey, when I deadlift, my kind of bothers my back? They're not going to want to come to you with concerns anymore if you blow them off when they come to you with that concern. So I think it's really important to validate and say, you know what, it's actually a really common thing I hear from a lot of women, and it's totally normal. So let's talk about this. Why do you feel like that you're afraid you're going to get bulky? Is it something that you have just heard, from the mainstream media forever? Did you start strength training in high school maybe when your diet was garbage and you gained some, you gained some muscle and did actually feel bulky? What's your experience? Why do you feel this way? So tapping into is validating how they feel, asking questions, truly listening to what their concerns are, and then figuring out how you can get them to feel comfortable engaging in new types of physical activity anyway. Maybe just telling them hey, we don't even have to start with strength training. We'll just start with body weight. To them, body weight might not be scary, but to you, if they haven't strength trained before, that body weight is strength training. So figuring out ways to ease them into it, letting them know it's not going to happen overnight, and letting them know that at any point in time, if there's something that they're not happy with, they can always come to you with that concern, and that you will help them eventually get where they want to be, that you're hearing their concerns, listening to them, and that you're not interested in shaping their body into what you want it to look like, but you're interested in helping them get where they want to be.
Perfect. Now, we won't go into the benefits of strength training for women because we could literally be here all day, but it's the exact same thing as men with additional benefits, mainly for postmenopausal women in terms of maintaining bone density, and we can go into that another time. But one of the other misconceptions, kind of concerns we have with women who are involved in strength training, and that is during pregnancy. Is weightlifting or strength training during pregnancy safe?
I'm so glad you asked this question. We're actually working on a project for this right now. We've been working on it for over 2 years, and it's a program that we're going to be releasing soon for women who are trying to conceive, who are pregnant, and then recovering from post-pregnancy. And again, it's kind of the 3-prong approach of nutrition, training, and mindset. And strength training is absolutely one of the best things that you can do during pregnancy. And one of the myths is actually that they say if you weren't doing it before you were pregnant, you don't start. So like you can only do what you were doing before pregnancy, and that's actually not true. You can start strength training in pregnancy. You can start exercising in pregnancy. The key is that if you were not exercising before, if you were sedentary, you need to exercise at a low to moderate intensity. If you were exercising before, for the most part, you can exercise at a moderate to high intensity. You can maintain that. What that looks like throughout pregnancy is going to change as your belly grows, as you're dealing with fatigue, things of that nature. But strength training is absolutely one of the best things that you can do. There, of course, are modifications that need to be made. So especially after around like week 20, certain exercises want to be avoided, like front-loaded stuff, push-ups and planks, anything that's going to put a lot of excess pressure on your core, on your rectus abdominis, because that's going to exacerbate the diastasis recti, which is the abdominal separation or the thinning of the linea alba, the connective tissue that connects the rectus abdominis. So things like that. Anything that puts a lot of excess downward pressure on your pelvic floor should start to be minimized. For example, we would switch someone from like a barbell back squat to maybe a goblet squat or, front squat or a goblet squat, something that's going to put a bit less downward pressure on the pelvic floor because you already have downward pressure on the pelvic floor. Anything that's really high impact, again, that kind of bounding over and over again on the pelvic floor is going to be reduced. But yeah, strength training overall is one of the absolute best things that a woman can do for herself and for her baby before, during, and after pregnancy.
Perfect. I think that's a really important myth that really needs to kind of be debunked now for the masses. And the other thing we know that during pregnancy and especially during labour, we end up with subsequent weakening of pelvic floor muscles after pregnancy. So how significant it is for pregnant women that after they have their child to re-strengthen these pelvic floor muscles, and then also just for general population, is pelvic floor strengthening something that every woman should be kind of actively engaging in?
Yeah, absolutely. So the pelvic floor question is really interesting. And one thing I wanted to hit on that's related, but also what you were just talking about was, in fitness, of course, we have this pendulum that always swings back and forth, right? So we have women who are scared to death of strength training. And then we have women who are so desperate to kind of prove that strength training is good and should be done during pregnancy, that they're engaging in really, really high intensity stuff, right? So like the super high intensity stuff, like 8 months, 9 months. So the important thing there, people are always like, oh my gosh, she's going to hurt her baby. She's probably not going to hurt her baby. If she was exercising at that intensity, if she can still exercise at that intensity at that point in her pregnancy, the fetal blood flow and, things of that nature are probably not as much of a concern because her body is prepared for that level of activity. But what no one's talking about, so her baby is probably fine. The body will always prioritize the baby over the mother. The baby is probably fine. What might not be fine is what's going on with her and her pelvic floor. And again, she could be having issues that she doesn't even know about. For example, pelvic organ prolapse, where the pelvic organs start to kind of descend or slump down, are things that women, there are different grades of that. These are problems that women can be having that they don't even notice or know anything about for quite a long time. So, and the issue with the pelvic floor is you're talking about strengthening. And strengthening the pelvic floor is important, but like any other muscle, it has to be able to both fully contract and fully relax. And it has to be able to fully relax in order to fully contract. And so what we see with a lot of women is, first of all, they're completely disconnected from their pelvic floor, right? They don't realize that it's part of their core, it's the bottom part of their core, and that it should actually be moving and responding as they breathe. And so getting women, again, in our pregnancy program, we talk about something called the connection breath. So it's connecting your breath with your pelvic floor. So as you're breathing in, you can feel your pelvic floor expand and descend. And then as you're breathing out, you can feel it kind of rise and come up. So the issue with pelvic floor, just calling it strengthening, is that a lot of women think that it's just a Kegel, right? It's something that they just need to grip and pull and flex all day. But you wouldn't walk around with your bicep like half flexed all day, right? And if you did, then like you couldn't fully contract it. It has to be able to fully lengthen and relax in order to be able to fully contract. So what we talk about a lot in the program is how to get women to connect. Again, the same mind muscle connection. Like, can you squeeze your glutes? Can you squeeze your biceps? Can you flex your quads? The same kind of mind muscle connection in order to teach them how to connect their breath with their pelvic floor, but how to get it to fully relax so that it can fully contract. Because strength is not the only issue. Timing is also an issue, right? So in coordinating it with your movement, and the level of contraction that your pelvic floor is doing based on the task at hand. Like you wouldn't like hyperflex to like pick a Kleenex up off the floor, right? So like when you're just moving around in your daily life and you're just doing your normal breathing, your pelvic floor should be lightly contracting. But when you're doing more and more difficult exercises, that contraction should be graded to the task at hand. So it should be able to contract more at different times. And then again, the timing part is key, because if it's not contracting when you need it to contract, then it's not doing its job. So there's a lot that goes into pelvic floor health and pelvic floor strength. And I am not the expert in this. For the program, we had over a dozen experts, PhDs, women's health physical therapists, pre and postnatal fitness experts, registered dietitians, naturopathic doctors, OBGYNs. All of these women contributed to the Moms Gone Strong program to make it what it is. So I have spent the last year and a half. I know a good amount of information, but I wouldn't call myself the end all be all expert on it. But that's the great part about what we do at Girls Gone Strong, and the collaboration is we're able to bring all of the different experts in together to contribute to this massive project. So the pelvic floor stuff is like like anything else. We could talk about it for the next 2 hours, but those are a couple of really important things. So it needs to be strong, but more than just strong, it needs to be able to fully relax and fully contract. It needs to, you need to figure out how to, or the body, you need to give the body the opportunity for the contraction to be graded to the difficulty of the task, and the timing and stuff needs to be on par with the activities that your body's doing. So there's a lot of stuff with pelvic floor, and it is important for general population. Everybody has a pelvic floor. Men have a pelvic floor. I think it's something like 1/3 of women experience urinary incontinence at some point in their life. And I think it's probably significantly higher than that. People just aren't talking about it. And so that is a symptom that the system is breaking down somewhere. Yeah. So that's a symptom that, there's something going on that needs to be fixed, that needs to be addressed. And so, but a lot of women have been taught that it's just normal. They're like, of course I leak a little when I sneeze or, laugh or cough or, do a squat or whatever. I've had kids. And it's like, that's not normal. Or I'm sorry, it is common, but it is not normal. Yeah. So that's the important part. It's a symptom that the system is breaking down somewhere, and that you have an issue that needs to be addressed. So there are luckily women's health physiotherapists that you can reach out and see. Some of them do internal work. Some of them don't do internal work. Doesn't really matter if you go see one that does or not, because if you need the internal work and the one you're seeing doesn't do it, then they will refer you to someone who does. So, seeing a women's health physiotherapist who is very experienced in working with women with these types of issues, with any kind of pelvic floor issues. Because the thing is, again, the pelvic floor could be the root of the problem, but it could show up as incontinence, back pain, hip pain, knee pain. Like, it can show up in all of these different ways. And so getting to the root of the problem is really, really important.
Perfect. Now, I think what we've covered so far has been absolute wealth of knowledge for any women listening or anyone that deals and works with women as clients. But I have a lot of fitness professionals listen to this show, and obviously you have brought Girls Gone Strong from a little bitty idea to an absolute global movement and kind of cult-like features at this stage. So if we talk about building your brand and social media, for you, how important was honesty in building your brand?
Oh, this is such a good question. For me, there was never any other option than that. Probably because I've been in therapy for so long. So the joke is that I went to therapy. I started going in like 2009 or 2010 because I was in a relationship and I was struggling to be vulnerable and to talk about like what was really going on, how I felt. So the joke is that therapy worked too well because now I talk about my feelings on the internet. Not only am I comfortable talking about my feelings, but I talk about it to the whole world on the internet. And so for me, it's kind of been the only option. And that's why one of my first kind of big articles that I wrote was in 2013. And it was called "It's Hard Out Here for a Fit Chick." And it was after I had been experiencing all of that backlash about my body. And I decided, like, I'm just going to talk about it. I'm just going to like tell everybody, like, this is what I'm experiencing. And it's really hard. And I think other people are probably experiencing it too. So for me, being authentic and transparent, as you know, it's kind of been the only option. And I think that it has made a huge difference in terms of people feeling like they're connected to me, like they can relate to me, like they're interested in what I'm going to say. And so, you know, it was never I'm not a very strategic person. So it was never like a strategy kind of thing. It was just like, hey, I think the world needs to hear about this. And I'm in a place where I'm comfortable talking about it. So here it is. And luckily, I think we've seen more people doing that over the last several years, more fitness professionals saying, hey, I don't have a six pack all the time. Hey, you know, sometimes I like to eat this. Hey, sometimes I don't feel like going to the gym. And I think that's great. But yeah, it was, and it wasn't even really that scary when I did it at first. I think because I had done so much introspection myself, it was just kind of like, hey, the world needs this information and I feel equipped to give it. And so here you go.
Brilliant. And what advice would you give for anyone, up-and-coming personal trainer, anyone as a fitness professional who want to build their social media and their brand presence? What would you suggest are kind of the key elements to building a successful brand?
Oh my goodness, I'm the worst person to ask this question to, David. How do you build a successful brand? Honestly, my answers are so annoying because the first one is to be so good that people can't ignore you. And I think that's a really hard thing to do. You know, people with a year or two of experience want to just put themselves out there, which I think is also fine. I don't ever want to tell someone that they're not qualified to start putting information out there, because I think a lot of really good people are too afraid to do it because they think their stuff isn't good enough yet. So I think just trying to be really helpful. I mean, I got started in 2005 giving away free information on the Figure Athlete and T-Nation forums. So that was 12 years ago. And that wasn't with any intention of building a brand or doing anything. It was just like, hey, I'm really interested in this, so I'm going to be as genuinely helpful as I can and not expect anything in return. So I did that. I mean, I've been giving away free information online for almost 12 years now. Yeah. So I think being willing to put in the work, being willing to get really, really good at your craft. I was terrible when I started in 2005, you know, like, I mean, I was, you know, thought meal plans were like the only way. And I thought that like, if someone wasn't following my meal plan, that they weren't dedicated enough. And, you know, like I just, I was not, a lot of the advice that I was giving then, I would be horrified about now, but I had a genuine desire to help people. I was willing to do it for free. I was willing to put in a crap ton of time and energy learning, and, you know, working underneath people who were much smarter than I was. I mean, from the time I got started in 2004, I was surrounded by people who had a ton of experience, and I was always learning from them. I was willing to be wrong. I was willing to say that I was wrong. And so I think that a lot of it, oh gosh, there's so many things that go into it. I also think being there first was really helpful. You know, like I will never deny the fact that starting a women's strength training movement 6 years ago was a big part of what allowed, you know, Girls Gone Strong to be successful, because we were one of the first people talking about it really openly for women. So I think, you know, that's really, really beneficial. But if you can't be there first, or you can't be one of the first, then you have to be so good that people can't ignore you. And in order to do that, you have to be willing to put in a shit ton of work, and you have to be willing to help people for free. And you have to be willing to really care that you're able to get people, you know, get them the information that they need that's actually going to be helpful for them. And then for me, I started, my boyfriend I started dating in 2013 was very business savvy. So we got together, and then, you know, the last couple of years, he's been an integral part of my business. He focuses mostly on the business, and I'm able to focus mostly on the mission and the vision and the voice, which is what I really care about. And I realize not everyone's gonna have that, but that's been huge for me, is having someone who is, focused on that so that I can focus on what I really care about, which is the content.
That's absolutely fantastic. So we've covered an absolute wealth of knowledge today. And before I ask you the final question, if people are looking to touch base with you or follow your information, your content, where are the best places to find you?
Yeah, absolutely. So they can find us at girlsgonestrong.com, of course. And then on Facebook, we're continuously updating our Facebook, and that's just facebook.com/girlsgonestrong. You can follow me, Molly Galbraith, on Facebook as well. And then we're on Instagram and Twitter. But really, the website, the girlsgonestrong.com website, we publish 2 to 3 times a week with content from the most brilliant female health and fitness professionals from all over the world, from all areas of health and fitness. And we cover tons of different topics. So definitely following us there, following us on Facebook so that you can continuously see that stuff. Subscribing to our newsletter is huge. We email a couple times a week with all of this great content. And, people who are on the newsletter also are first to know about everything and get all the discounts and all that kind of stuff. So finding us on the website, on Facebook, on Instagram, all of those are great places to follow.
Perfect. And we'll put links to that in the show notes so everyone can find them easily. So that brings us to the final question. And I can imagine you're going to have a really insightful answer to this, and that is...
No pressure.
Yeah, the question I ask everyone, and it's not related to health, fitness, be related to whatever you want, and that is, what would you say is the biggest mistake or learning experience that you have had that has changed the way you approach either your career or your mindset in general?
Mm. So you said the biggest mistake, is that what you said?
Yeah, or learning experience.
Learning experience. I think the biggest mistake I made when anything in life, working with clients, changes that I'm trying to make, is trying to overhaul too many things at once. And whether that's giving my client a diet plan instead of starting them off with like small, bite-sized, sustainable habits, or, telling them that they need to be in the gym 5 days a week when they haven't even taken a walk around the block, or trying to change things in my own life where I'm like, yeah, I can start this new, totally different, habit like overnight and it'll be totally fine because I've got a lot of discipline and willpower. I think that recognizing that change is hard, that long-term sustainable change is harder, and that it takes consistent practice and realizing and recognizing the small steps that it's going to take to get to the eventual long-term goal, I think would probably be the biggest learning experience that I've had. The biggest
information that people can take away, both practically and kind of mental health, body confidence way. So it's been an absolute honor having you on the show. Thanks so much for chatting with me.
Thank you for having me, David.